Welcome to another live Mast Cell 360 show. I'm Jamie Fries-Miller, your host and health coach here at Mast Cell 360. Whether you're joining us live or catching the replay, we're so glad to have you in this community. These replays are all about empowering you on your mast cell journey with practical insight, expert guidance, and support from our amazing community. Today, we are going to be joined by a special guest, Magdalena Wszelaki. So sorry, I'm butchering that. Wszelaki, and lead practitioner, Kimberly Quirk. Unfortunately, our other lead practitioner, Alex, could not join us today. All right. So today we are going to be diving into MCAS and hormones, perimenopause, menopause, and balancing hormones. Before we get going, today's presentation is for informational and educational purposes. It is not meant to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent illness. Be sure to discuss any health recommendations with your healthcare provider. Some of the links that we share during this presentation or on our website are affiliate links, which means Mast Cell 360 may take a very small commission if you purchase through our links. We only recommend products that we love and use personally or use in the Mast Cell 360 practice. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the basics of hormones, how hormones change in perimenopause and menopause, what you can do to support your body gently, and how this all fits into calming down the mast cells and healing. And of course, if we have time, we will do a live Q&A. So we ask that you please only ask your question one time. Please keep it on today's topic of hormones, and please understand that we are unable to answer in-depth personal health questions. So today's special guest is Magdalena Wszelaki. She is the founder of Hormones Balance and created the Estrogen Reset Program. After overcoming her own health challenges, she set out to empower women with practical food and lifestyle-based strategies for hormone support. Her work bridges science and holistic wellness, and she's helped thousands of women worldwide understand their bodies, balance hormones, reduce inflammation, and feel like themselves again. So I'm going to bring up our guests, Kimberly and Magdalena. It is so good to have you both with us today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me and doing this. I think perimenopause is gaining a lot more traction now, and so that's so wonderful to talk about in the context of histamine and mast cell.
Yeah, and I recently learned how much earlier it really starts.
Hallelujah to that.
Yeah, we had Shay Wright from Healthy Gut on, and I learned so much there because I have a friend in her 40s, and she was like, "Oh, the hot flashes, it's perimenopause," and I was like, "You're too early for that." And I felt bad after hearing what Shay had to say. I was like, "Wow, no, coming to the acceptance of what your body's doing and empowering yourself. Okay, if this is really happening now, how do we handle that, and how do we feel empowered to navigate this change in life as women?"
Absolutely. And it's I will say, even for me, even though I do this for a living, I had my own learning curve to it as well. And even when I got the hot flashes, I was still in denial about it. How about that?
Yeah.
And not all women get hot flashes. That's the tricky part about this, is that about 30% of women get hot flashes. The rest of us don't. And it can manifest in so many other ways. And we can talk about the symptoms, if you guys want, but I think we should cover them. In my perimenopause quiz, we have 87 symptoms related to perimenopause. And then, things start changing and go I suddenly got this BV. Down there, everything is itching. I have not had a new partner. What's going on? My shoulder is frozen, right? Everything aches. And I'm forgetting words. What did I walk into this room for? And I'm not even 65 years old. I'm in my happy, 40s, right? And then is this my boss is suddenly a horrible person, and my partner is unlivable, right? And then, when you resolve this, you suddenly realize, wait a second, it actually wasn't my partner and my vagina, but it's not my bones to be blamed. I'm just going through perimenopause, and so I'm so glad we are talking about that kind of stuff, and you guys are creating awareness about this. My whole platform is about perimenopause, just to create that awareness much earlier, because we can really change the quality of a person's life. And the other thing that's happening in perimenopause is because of those fluctuations of hormones, a lot more women are predisposed to be having estrogen dominance, right? And then the mast cell stuff starts happening because of that extra estrogen and dropping progesterone. And so you have like this perfect storm happening where the mast cells, suddenly you've been taking care of yourself and following Mast Cell 360 and getting everything under control, right? And then suddenly your hormones start doing this, especially estrogen, and your progesterone is tanking, and you don't really realize that. And everything you've done so far with Mast Cell 360, following all their advice and dietary recommendations and all the supplements and self practices, suddenly aren't working like they used to. What's going on, right? The answer is your hormones.
Yeah. Magdalena, I know you've shared a little bit of what you do. This is what you do, right? But can you share a little bit more about your personal journey and how you came to specialize in the hormone piece?
Yeah, sure. So I used to be, this is like my second life, if you will, second wave of life, and that is doing this piece. So I'm a endocrine nutritionist, and I'm a published author, and hormones are just like really my world now. But I wasn't like that before. I was an executive for an advertising agency, always on the road, traveling internationally a lot, and living under a lot of stress. And not surprising, in 2008, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and I was really lucky to get diagnosed really quickly. I was having a lot of anxiety attacks, and I couldn't sleep at night. My heart was palpitating. I think I was going between hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. What I didn't know at that time, that my adrenals were completely fried, as in my HPA axis was just really dysregulated. I wasn't sleeping. I was having terrible PMSs, right? And so much so, like, I'll have to take a day off from work just to get through this, having 3 different types of painkillers. What I didn't know back then, it was most likely, that was for sure, was estrogen dominance, right? Something that, women with estrogen dominance, we are just told to live with it, right? And it's like, PMS is normal, having horrible periods is normal, having mood swings from hell, and almost like suffocating your partner, it's normal, right? It's just part of being a woman. Just a horrible way of, preconditioning women. So definitely adrenal issues, estrogen dominance, and hypothyroidism. And it took a while for me to finally realize that advertising wasn't for me. I got out of it, went to nutrition school, came out on the other side, setting up my own business. And it's just like the whole trajectory, right, of dealing with estrogen dominance, that like, one of the interesting symptoms is having really terrible melasma. I was covered in here and had brown spotting around here. From far, it looked like as if I was growing a mustache, even though I had no facial hair whatsoever. Really bad mood swings, to the point of destroying my closest relationships, because in a moment you think the whole world is against you and everybody's wrong and you're right. And then horrendous sleeping problems, and we all know we can't really function without it. And so and there's so many other ones that I probably I'm forgetting. The thing about me is that I've never really wanted to allow it to go for too long, and I wanted to take control over my symptoms and my health as quickly as possible, and be more on the prevention side rather than be, I don't have a story of like I'm flat on the ground and not being able to get up, and that I didn't get to that point, right? So I started off with thyroid stuff, Hashimoto's, hyperthyroidism. I also had Graves' disease I forgot to mention, in my late 20s. So that you can see there's the story of autoimmunity there. And then realizing that healing the gut and just detoxification. I used to live in China, and so a lot of my symptoms started happening in China, which is basically, the only way I can explain it is no access to clean water, clean air. You have no control over what you're eating. Even the organic food is probably not organic. And horrendous stress, terrible air pollution. And getting out of that and moving to the United States just really gave me a way to like reconstitute my body and just really get a better hold of it. And the reason why I pivoted towards perimenopause, is because of my own set of symptoms, like I talked about at the beginning, of going like, oh my God, I had no idea that a lot of those things, now I retrospect on it 7 years ago. I'm in postmenopause now, by the way. I just had a menopause party, by the way. I think it's such a cool thing to do. Like when you have no period for the 12 months and you officially on that day you're in menopause. After it's all postmenopause, right? I actually had a party for all my closest friends, and then I had a party for my community just to celebrate it, because once you are past that point, it gets easier, as in because your hormones don't do this anymore. It's just more like it's flat and it's stable. But before that, the 7 years, I was going through perimenopause by about 8 years. And I think I had a very clear awareness of it on the past 3 years. But the other 5 years, I was totally in the dark that what I was going through was related to perimenopause. So I thought I need to talk about this more. So that's why today, really, what I want to bring it to the table and help women is helping women create the best experience ever going through perimenopause. Pay the attention to estrogen dominance, which I think is very, very underestimated. They say the PCOS is the #1 hormonal imbalance in a country. I would argue and actually say the estrogen dominance is just we don't diagnose it correctly. There is actually a code for hyperestrogenism, but who's been ever diagnosed with that? No one, right? Yet, if we talk about the symptoms, then I think majority of your listeners today will go like, this one, yep, that's me, or my sister, or my daughter, or my cousin, or or my best friend, right? It's like this. So common. Common.
I feel like before we dive really deep into like the changes in perimenopause and menopause, can you like at a high level walk us through like how do our bodies make these hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and what systems need to be working well for that process to stay balanced? I just want to throw up here real quick because there's I've heard it explained as like the reverse puberty, right? So
Yes.
like and Karen is saying here, is there a connection to puberty as well? Because she has a highly sensitive daughter who's only 11 and a half, beginning the early puberty signs. She's worried that the MCAS may get worse. So, how are these hormones being produced in our body, and what needs to be working well for them to stay balanced? And then we can dive into what are those perimenopause and menopause symptoms.
Absolutely. And there's also, if you guys want, we can also cover symptoms of estrogen dominance as well, which is like a subset of perimenopause, just to call out those, because like the lady who's asking about her daughter, a lot of young girls show symptoms of of estrogen dominance as well, right? And it's really, really early. So how are hormones created? So just a super simple, basic overview. We have the endocrine system, that is a set of glands that produce hormones. Is anything from your pineal gland, which is like, for those of you who are a little bit more energetically in tune and spiritual, that's your pineal gland. We have the pituitary gland, which is right in the middle of your brain, right? We have the thyroid gland that produces thyroid hormones. We have our ovaries that are big producers of estrogen. Close to that, in the uterus, we have the corpus luteum that is going to be producing progesterone during certain cycles of life, right? And then you have the pancreas that produces insulin, right? So that's, a lot of people don't realize that diabetes is actually a hormonal problem, right? So all of those hormones are pretty complex on one hand, but on the other hand, is kind of the simple version of that is that your hormones are messengers. They all carry a message. They get distributed through blood and lymphatic system all around the body, and they all, majority of our organs, whether it's the skin, your hair, your nails, your heart, your liver, have receptors for these hormones. And this is the reason why when hormones tank, like when we have too much or too little of a hormone, those organs can really suffer from that, right? We can have heart palpitations, or we could have hair loss, or we can have muscle loss, right? Or skin is sagging, or eyesight is beginning to drop, and so on and so forth. So all of that is, they play a huge role. And let me not forget, I think the biggest receptor for, for our hormones is our brain, right? And this is the reason why when we have too little, too much, whether it's estrogen, progesterone, thyroid hormone, cortisol. Cortisol, by the way, so we have also the adrenals, right, that produce cortisol. So all of those work together. And, when the brain, so for example, the brain being such a big receptor, when it's too much or too little of that hormone, this is when we have a lot of the time depression, anxiety, forgetfulness, how we view the world, like a sense of negativity, darkness, right? All of that, not to mention ideations for suicide, which is also the highest amongst perimenopausal women, can all play into how we show up, how we look, how we feel, how we see the world. Hormones are huge. You can't live without them when they're out of balance.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so you actually, we talked a little bit about the estrogen dominance. Let's go into there, because I feel like you said you believe it's the number one above PCOS, and it's a common hormone imbalance that we see in the MCAS community. And I'm going to throw up a link. We actually have a blog on estrogen dominance and MCAS. So for those in the community who are experiencing that, we can send you there. And we've talked about estrogen dominance before, but again, for those watching it, can you define what that estrogen dominance really is?
Yeah. Would it be okay if I start with symptoms so people can connect to it maybe?
Go for it.
Yeah. So physical, let's talk about the physical symptoms first. So things like the classical one is for women who are still menstruating is your PMS, terrible PMSs, irregular periods, very heavy periods, unpredictable periods, right? All of that can be related to estrogen dominance. Things like breast tenderness, which we are so used to the fact that, they swell up and you can go from cup A to cup C in a course of 2-3 days. Let me tell you, that's not normal. And having fibrocystic breasts and having dense breasts, or having also cyst on the breast, finding a cyst is a super scary experience for any woman, right, who've ever experienced that, especially when it's on one breast and not the other, because Dr. Google is going to tell you that it's high chances of bringing breast cancer, right, which is not even true. And so that, again, a lot of the breast changes can be and is due to estrogen dominance. That was actually one of my stories. And any woman who has ever found a cyst before knows how scary it is to find one, and then how do you diagnose it correctly, and then all the waiting and all that. Bloating and retention is another one. Like if you can't remove your ring very easily, like your shoes suddenly don't fit your feet because you're so bloated. And it's especially if you're still cycling and it goes with your cycle, when estrogen is at highest, like around your ovulation, you're really bloated. That is could be a clear sign of estrogen dominance. Weight gain, especially around the area of your hips and thighs, like storing a lot of fat, storing a lot of cellulite around there, is super estrogenic. So women who tend to be estrogenic put on weight like a pear. Like when I put on weight, I'm definitely a pear. Versus women who have more of a metabolic weight gain, right? It's all around the abdomen. Then it's more of a visceral fat, right, of their tummy. That's more to do with other hormones like insulin issues, right? High testosterone. So fatigue and sluggish metabolism, that's super common. Hair loss. I would say the number one cause of hair loss would be thyroid, PCOS, but then soon right after that will be estrogen dominance. Headaches and migraines, especially that goes with your cycle. So like when you're ovulating, you might be having a headache, or when you just before getting your period, you're having a horrible headache. That could be super correlated. Other ones, like I already mentioned, let's talk about the emotional cognitive changes, like mood swings, being completely irrational during this time, increased PMS symptoms, right? Having anxiety and panic attacks, and especially that are correlated with your cycle, difficulty concentrating, and sometimes even memory loss, or like a brain fog, decrease in libido is a common one. One other one I want to mention is uterine fibroids, uterine polyps, super common. Part of the reason why, for example, I developed a whole line of products specifically for the uterine health is because of the statistic, and that is 250,000 women get their uteruses removed every year in the United States. majority of them most likely could be preventable if the women treated the fibroids much earlier, if their physician has given them some direction on how to manage the growth of the fibroids. And fibroids typically grow because of excess of estrogen, and we can talk about that later. One other one which I'm super passionate about is thyroid nodules. Thyroid nodules, as well as thyroid nodules, are oftentimes due to estrogen dominance, and this is also one of the common causes of removal of thyroid, is because of that, which again is completely preventable. Lastly, let me just mention estrogenic cancers. So estrogen in itself does not cause cancer. It is the type of estrogens that we are how we metabolize that estrogen, and I'll explain that in a second about types of estrogen dominance. How we metabolize that estrogen, that those so-called dirty estrogens, is what cause DNA damage, and the DNA damage then causes the growth of a tumor. So those estrogenic tumors could be thyroid cancers, but more importantly, breast cancer. So most of the time you hear the term estrogen receptor positive or progesterone receptor positive, which is not the fault of progesterone. It's actually that receptor gets overstimulated by the estrogen, that dirty estrogen. So a lot of breast cancers, 80% of breast cancers in the United States, in the most developed countries, are due to excess estrogen. And then ovarian cancers, as well as uterine cancers, can be due to estrogen dominance as well. So, part of the reason why I'm so passionate about estrogen dominance is because it's also my family history. I've inherited genes from both sides of my family that makes me a super slow estrogen detoxifier. I don't metabolize estrogen well at all. I have to be really on my best behavior most of the time to not have a lot of these symptoms come back, including I used to have thyroid nodules as well, a lot of fibrocystic issues with my with my breasts, super scary stuff. And there's definitely a genetic component of like the COMT gene, right? That I've inherited both sides of my family. And that explains, for example, why both sides of my family, there are deaths. We have deaths on all my aunts have passed away from a variety of estrogenic cancers. And furthermore, there is almost no woman in my family that actually still has a uterus after age 50. It's almost like a joke with my family. And so except for my sister and I, everybody else had the uteruses removed, So I have to, like, someone like me has to work extra hard to prevent it, and be so-called on my best behavior, right? And write a book about it, because if I help myself, then I can, help other people with it. But yeah, so super common. But the reason why I'm super passionate about this, and I want to urge every one of you who is like listening to these symptoms going like, you read the article about estrogen dominance on Mast Cell 360's blog.
Yeah, that up right here.
Perfect. Is that when you do something about this early, because unaddressed estrogen dominance for a long time can lead to something much more serious further down the road. It starts with the PMS. It starts with a little lump here. It starts with a thyroid nodule that your doctor told you, like, we're going to just wait and see. And then 5 years from now, you suddenly go, oh, now it's a cancer. Oh, now it's estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. And I've seen this many times before with my friends, colleagues, my family members who were ignoring the signs for a long time because you assume it's normal. And then they ended up in a much worse position. Where that's only then, most of the time, when people start making massive changes in your life. And oftentimes it works. But why put that stress on yourself? Do it now. Do it early.
Do you find that those cystic lumps in the breast, they come and go with like the cycle change? So like it will be enlarged at a certain time of the cycle?
Absolutely. Yeah. They absolutely do. But it's not because it is because estrogen fluctuates through the cycle, as you know. But it's also because when the woman is producing too much of that dirty estrogen, that's when it's even more pronounced. So let's use this maybe as a segue to talking about the two forms of estrogen dominance, so we can set the stage for that. Can we do that?
Go for it.
Okay. So the first type of estrogen dominance is, I already alluded to it a few times, I call it the dirty estrogens, right? So dirty estrogens, it just means that your body is metabolizing, is breaking down that estrogen that gets produced in the ovaries, right? Later in postmenopause, the adrenals take over to produce estrogen. You also have it from visceral fat and, further down the road. That estrogen does not get broken down correctly. Now, what I mean by that is that if think of it as it's like a river that's going, imagine like you seeing a river, and this river goes through this bank, right? And this bank then separates to two streams. One stream is a nice clean stream, and that's a protective, healthy estrogen that we all need to function well, right? For all those things that we talked about, your mood, your hair, your ability to talk, right? And then the other stream produces what I call dirty estrogens. And those are the metabolites of estrogen that are unhealthy. For those of you who have ever done a Dutch test, DUTCH, you can see how it's broken down to the 2, 4, and 16 metabolites. And that's a great test because, the nuance is in the detail, right? The devil is in the detail. And that's the kind of stuff that blood tests will never show you, is how you're breaking down those estrogens. Now, you're producing too much of the 16, that is a problem. If you're producing too much of the 4, and then your genes are then turning that into further toxic compounds, that is potentially very problematic. So how does the metabolism happen, right? People go like, well, what can I do? What did I do to help myself? Two main places, your liver and your gut health. And I know you guys are huge on that. And so those compounds are going to be hugely beneficial to support your liver. When somebody's asking what test, it's called DUTCH, Dutch test. And those compounds are going to be anything that you do for your liver, whether it's going to be doing bitter greens, clean diet, whether it's going to be calcium deglucarate. I know Beth was a big fan of calcium deglucarate, and now that is a huge game changer, whether it's sulforaphane from broccoli sprouts. We can talk about foods if we have the time for it later, but anything to do castor oil liver packs, right? All of that can be super helpful to the liver. The second one is your digestion. How healthy is your digestion? And so again, we can do probably another podcast just about digestion, and you guys have I know you have a lot of resources. So just paying attention to those two things and supporting your body through that can make a huge difference in how we metabolize that estrogen. So that's one form of estrogen dominance, how we break down those estrogens, okay? The second form of estrogen dominance, which happens a lot, even more common in perimenopause, is when the balance between estrogen and progesterone starts changing, right? So think of estrogen and progesterone like two dancing partners. Like if you see a dancing competition and you see those two partners are like totally in the flow, it looks beautiful, great. If one of them is like super extravagant and overly cocky, and the other one is kind of like meek and small, like it doesn't look good, right? And so that's exactly what happens with perimenopause, where it's very tricky because a lot of people think that perimenopause estrogen starts dropping. Actually, it doesn't. Before it starts doing that, it does this. Your ovaries are stimulated like by the pituitary gland going like, produce more estrogen, we are low. So there's like, boom, you have the surge of estrogen. And then it drops, and then it goes up again. And so is the surges of that estrogen. They suddenly like you're just having like the worst day ever. The whole world is falling apart. Your boss is horrible, right? Like you don't want to go out and meet friends for dinner because you're just not in the mood for it, right? Out of the blue. So it's the fluctuations. So it's the up and down and up and down, but a lot of it is up as well. But at the same time, progesterone starts really dropping. And so this is when the imbalance starts happening, and the estrogen dominance can be very pronounced in perimenopause. It's because of these fluctuations of estrogen going especially up, and the progesterone is dropping. So now suddenly the difference between them becomes much wider, and that is a problem. And this is the reason why, I see, for example, let me give you an example. I was interviewing somebody the other day for a position with us. And this woman is 56 or 58 years old. And she says, I will not be able to accept this job until 2 weeks from now because I'm going to have a surgery on Monday and I'm getting my uterus removed. And I said, well, why would you do that? And she says, because my fibroids are like in the size of an orange. And it's too late, right? It's too late. And she said, so here's another story, right, of those. She says, I've always had a problem with estrogen dominance. Now I know. and she had her thyroid removed because she had thyroid cancer. So clearly this woman has a history of estrogen dominance. No one told her. She never heard about this until interviewing with me. And now she has, and then her fibroids, she said, in the past 4 years started growing so quickly that she just could not control it. Doctor didn't know what to do, put her on a pill, didn't do anything, as you could imagine. And now she's having her uterus removed, right? So she's 58 years old, right? And this is when you have uncontrolled, unmanaged estrogen dominance, oftentimes in perimenopause, it can be worse. Other symptoms of estrogen dominance in perimenopause that are very prevalent are things like flooding. So women suddenly are going through 4 tampons a day. The period goes on for 7 days. They feel really weak, right? Or periods that are extremely pain, like the PMS is just like the puberty in reverse, right? So like now PMS is like as if I was 17 years old again, right? Like I can't go to work, I can't function today because it's so painful. So again, is that estrogen dominance that can create all of this. And so you can change the fluctuations of estrogen in perimenopause, but what you can do is, for example, support yourself with extra progesterone, whether it's in the form of a herb like Vitex, chaseberry. I'm a big fan of this. If it works for you, it doesn't work for everyone. Did not work for me. But like in Germany, for example, it's prescribed as a regular treatment for women going through perimenopause, doing fertility treatments. And then, and if that doesn't work, then I typically see herbs working. I'm an herbalist too, right? So I see herbs working a lot of the time at the beginning of perimenopause, but not in later phases of perimenopause. And so at that point, you might want to talk to someone and get some advice on maybe getting on progesterone, cream, oil. Oral progesterone is great for falling asleep. It stimulates the GABA receptors, so it's going to be more for sedative or anti-anxiety properties, but not for all the other benefits. So there are options, but yeah, it can be very much managed.
Thank you for that, because I feel like I feel like perimenopause is being more talked about, but also the estrogen dominance, there's a lot more light being brought to it. So my next question, I think, is, I know you know a lot about mast cells, Magdalena, but I'm going to ask Kimberly to kind of discuss how the estrogen impacts the mast cells and inflammation in the body, and feel free to share as well. But I think because this audience is most likely dealing with MCAS as well, how do those two really fit in together? So Kimberly, can you give us like a high level overview of the connection?
Yeah. So definitely that shift, right? For the higher estrogen, the lower progesterone stimulates those mast cells, like they lose their stability. And so then the mast cell comes in, and it makes complete sense for my journey too, because I started getting sick around 42. And things have come down now that I'm in menopause. So it's like, it's amazing. There is a big role there. And yeah, as that estrogen receptor, right? And changes in estrogen, just as the estrogen increases. And it's not just the hormones, it's the toxins, right? The estrogenic toxins, the mycotoxins are adding to that burden and making us estrogen dominant. And yeah, we typically see that imbalance. And even though they might be lower estrogen, right? The estrogen might be dropping, but still estrogen dominant, right? In terms of the balance with the progesterone. And then
this is key. I mean, that's one thing that we haven't talked about, is asking the question, where are those estrogen coming from? Because it's not just you producing them, but it can also be external, right? So so I don't want to go in that direction, but like you guys do so much education on that, like throw away all your toxic skincare, your what you cook with, right? What you inhale in your house, all the when you get into Uber or Lyft and this guy has this air freshener, just ask him to toss the thing away and tell him he's poisoning himself, right? And then give him 5 stars for doing that. But yeah, all of that, for sure, all of that adds on to it in a huge way. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. It's yeah, so let's talk about that, because in the context of mast cell, and so first of all, that excess estrogen we're talking about, and especially in perimenopause, when you do have those surges, right, before it settles down, before the ovaries are like, okay, we are done. Your ovaries, I mean, sorry to say, but like the ovaries literally are gonna die off, and they're gonna be producing almost no hormones at all for the rest of your life. And other endocrine systems, including like your visceral fat, actually, right, and your adrenals are gonna come and step in and start helping out. So, but before that happens, and you're going through that craziness, the problem with that extra estrogen we're talking about is that estrogen stimulates your mast cells, right? And this is where the releasing of histamine all starts happening. All your inflammatory stuff starts all surfacing all over again. There was somebody saying that there was like a background noise, like a low level. Is that coming from me by any chance?
It's happening when you're talking. So I know I told you didn't need a microphone today. That's on me, guys. But I don't think I could try muting, and Kimberly can try muting while you're talking to see if that helps.
Okay. Okay. And then we have the other really interesting thing is that something a lot of people don't realize is that mast cells actually have estrogen receptors. So the higher that estrogen goes up, right, now all these mast cells are receiving all that estrogen and then get stimulated. They get stimulated, right? And that creates even more histamine release. So it's kind of crazy in that way. And on the other hand, it's a two-way street, and there's like this unfortunate cycle, right? That's happening because when you have an MCAS flare up, then this is also it happens during times of high estrogen, right? So like before ovulation, a lot of women experience like worsening, right, of MCAS symptoms, and that can be because of that estrogen is highest at that point. Also, it's it's such a vicious cycle, right? Because it's estrogen effects on mast cells. It creates like this release of histamine that can further then upregulate estrogen. So you're releasing more histamine, and that histamine causes more estrogen to be released. So it's I'm curious, like, how do you guys on your end work with patients like that who have the MCAS elevated and have estrogen dominance? I know what to do on the estrogen dominance side of things, and I can talk about that, like what my protocol is. But I'm curious, like on your end, what do you then do to help them break that cycle?
So yeah, I mean, we find it hard to work with hormones up front, right? Because we need to go. Most people we're dealing with are dealing with mold toxicity. So a lot of those molds are estrogenic. So supporting the detox when they're there, right? First we have to stabilize those mast cells, but when they are in the detox phase, and some tools we do love, obviously, is calcium D-glucarate if somebody is really estrogenic. DIM is another one that we suggest to help balance temporarily, just so we're not waiting till later. But obviously, we run like a Dutch test if somebody's having a ton of symptoms up front, and how can we support that balance as best we can, knowing we can't fix it perfectly. Same with the gut health until we're on the other side of detox.
Yeah. Do you guys use sulforaphane in your protocols?
We don't tend to use sulforaphane. It's not one of our major ones. Do we use it sometimes? Sometimes, but we use some other liver supports. Yeah.
Okay. I personally use sulforaphane a lot with estrogen dominance, just because. So for those of you who are new to this, sulforaphane is a compound that's found in broccoli sprouts. And so a lot of times people say, what about other sprouts? Like, I like growing radish sprouts. And no, they're not found in other ones, specifically broccoli sprouts. And they tend to be, depending on the sprouts, they can be anything between 7 to 30 times higher than a full-grown broccoli. So just caveat on that. And you can grow it yourself and put it into your smoothie and stuff like that. There is no high histamine, correct, in sprouts?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe the dried sprouts, and I'm trying to think of some of the reasons why Beth might not have included it. It might have been upregulating a certain pathway or something like that in relation to the mycotoxins. Okay. I know she was always support glucuronidation.
Right. Okay, so it will be calcium D-glucarate will be a fantastic compound for that. But yeah, so so interesting correlation between those two. And one of the things that also I have found just really helpful with our population is just really the introduction of progesterone, because progesterone is just such a calming. A lot of people, the name progesterone came from the word progestation, right? So, and the conventional medicine, conventional medical world has a lot of appreciation for progesterone for fertility and procreation, right? Great, but then have zero appreciation for it, like as if it was the only thing was beneficial to get pregnant and deliver a baby. And then the question is, what does progesterone do for everything else? And it turns out it does a lot, and especially for women in perimenopause, menopause. So we've got to appreciate it, that the lack of sleep. So how do you know, like, you're dropping on progesterone, right, in perimenopause? One of the biggest symptoms is women suddenly start having problems with sleeping, either falling asleep or you wake up between 1 and 3, and yes, it could be 11 hours, sure, but it's like, it's most likely if you're 45 and above and you're suddenly having sleeping problems, you never had them before, it's not your liver hour, it's probably low progesterone. Another one is, which is interesting, is having suddenly a lot of anxiety, like becoming that person who is like constantly worried about things, rather than from a person you will always super chill, and then everything is beginning to worry you now, right? Another one is like, if you are still cycling, suddenly your cycles become shorter, right? So like you go from 28 days down to 22 days. That's typically your luteal phase, which is progesterone dominant, is gonna get shorter and shorter because it's less progesterone. And this is when we are, that's when it's most likely your progesterone is beginning to drop, right? So those are just simple indications. Irregular periods, for some women, flooding that I talked about can be very easily fixed by adding some progesterone.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a great overview, because like we hear a lot from our community that are struggling with those symptoms, like, connected to hormone shifts, like fatigue, weight gain, mood changes, sleep. And, obviously the list goes on. But so like you said, you're around that age. How do people like really know that those are connected to the perimenopause or menopause versus maybe like other things?
Well, I mean, I would say a combination of symptoms, right? So like if you look at, we have a perimenopause quiz on our website, just take that and it will show you from the level of symptoms. And if you guys want, we can also go over symptoms of perimenopause, because there's actually kind of a fascinating list of like the less common symptoms. Like if you want, I can cover that. But it's if somebody prefers to test, then I would say, and there's a lot of conversations going on in the chat right now about testing. I would say that for steroid hormones, the golden standard now is Dutch, the UTCH Dutch test. For steroid hormones, meaning your cortisol, DHEA, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, and your estrogen metabolism, which is so important, like I explained, I would only depend on Dutch for that. If you're looking at your thyroid hormone, like your blood sugar levels, insulin, all of that other stuff, blood is great. If your doctor is testing you to rule out or confirm you in perimenopause, the only thing that's good with blood is doing your FSH or LH test. So that's your follicle stimulating hormone. If it's above, some people say 25, others look at 30 and above. That means that it's a hormone that gets released. I think it's through the pituitary gland, and pituitary gland then is, like as the name implies, it stimulates the follicle stimulating hormone to produce that estrogen, right? And it's when it's trying harder and harder and harder is because those ovaries are beginning to shut down, and that's why it's shooting up, right? So anything above that, or LH, the luteal hormone, is another good one to take a look at. That will determine whether you're in perimenopause and not. That can be used with blood, and that's good. For all the other hormones, like I said, estrogen, progesterone, I would use Dutch. And I will say just one on that. When I was in private practice, I'm not anymore, but I was in private practice, I've had a lot of people coming to us to me and saying, hey, my doctor says I'm totally fine, my hormones are looking good, right? And they show me the panel, and estrogen is within range, the progesterone is within range or whatnot. Yet this person is having PMS so much so that she shuts down on the day before her period. She's got a fibroid. She's got a history of thyroid cancer, right? And so you kind of like go, that doesn't make any sense. And then I'll run a Dutch test on her, and then a completely different story would unveil. So just do not depend on blood tests if you want to confirm or rule out estrogen dominance.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a lot about like the most important things being like the liver and the gut for clearing that excess estrogen. Can you tell people like why that's so important? I mean, I think it alluded to it, but like focusing on that being an issue and why we need to get rid of it and what can we do to support the liver and gut?
Yeah. So the liver is, you have different detoxification pathway in the liver, right? Like the sulfation pathway, glucuronation pathway you guys mentioned, right? Methylation pathway, and there's 3 others. And every one of them has a different role, different role in detoxifying us from different toxins or metabolites. And so, for example, like if you drink coffee, your liver is involved, alcohol, your liver is involved in metabolizing of that. And it's no different with your hormones, right? And so a lot of times when the liver is overtaxed, what we do then is the body prioritizes things, and it would always take care of the most serious toxins, including bacteria, viruses, right? Mold. All of that is going to be going through the liver, and the liver would always prioritize like the worst toxins that don't kill you. But hormones kind of like go on the back burner, and it's not the priority for the body. Why? Because you can still live and function, and the body, the liver will do anything to keep us alive, right? So this is where we can help the liver by adding like what we call cofactors to help them bind those toxins up and get them evacuated. And let me just mention this before I move any further with the liver, is that a lot of times we talk about the liver and the digestion, but actually the number one body system that has to work really well even for the liver to detox, or the gentle detoxification of the liver, whatever you're doing for the liver, would only work if you are pooping, right? If you're not pooping, because it's like we talk about the phase 1 liver detoxification, we talk about phase 2, right? A lot of practitioners do. Actually, the phase 3 is the most important thing. If you're not pooping, that stuff is not evacuated. You're literally evacuating all those metabolites, all these metabolized hormones, as those estrogens, testosterone, everything, right? As well as toxins, like true toxins. Now, if you're not pooping, all of that gets recycled back into the body. And so all that work you've done, all the liver packs, all the calcium glucarate, all of that stuff, you spend a lot of time and effort putting in your body, ain't gonna work unless you're evacuating correctly. So always a full evacuation, making sure. One of my favorite ways of doing this, if you're not sure if you fully evacuated or not, I don't know, do you guys teach this in your class? Like lay down flat on the ground, right? And then you can feel your hip bone, and right from the hip bone, about 1 inch in, that's where your colon is, your rising colon is, and descending. Sorry, that's your descending colon. If you feel anything like a sausage in there, that means stuff is still there. If it's empty, right? And do this in the morning, because in the morning you're gonna have stuff in there, right? By default. And so you like learn how to find it. Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it in pieces? And then just doing a very nice soft massage. You can do some castor oil on it on the outside, and just going down. Always you want to push it down, not up, right? Push it down and just massage it. It literally feels like a good Polish sausage. I'm Polish, right? So good Polish kielbasa, that you can feel in there. And that's when you fully evacuated or not. So that's, I think I would say, like, that's number one step, is focusing on that. And then going back to the liver, you guys cover supplements so much. So I don't want to talk too much about that, but I think the part that I love to address with the liver as a person who lives with nutrition and writes cookbooks about this, I would say surround yourself with better as much bitter flavors as you can, because the liver loves bitters. So, things like parsley, cilantro, radishes. Like if you find radishes and turnips a little bit too potent, or too, what's the word for it, pungent, then you might want to roast them. And actually, roasted radishes and turnips are amazing. And they all contain, you guys mentioned DIM, right? So diethylmethane. They all contain amounts of DIM as well, less concentrated form, of course. And the liver is going to love this. If you are, one thing you can do, like a little night practice, is to do a bit of bitters like before a meal. So for example, if you can brew a tea with like a dandelion root, anything from artichoke, burdock root, right? All those bitter, but they're bitter, but they're kind of a little sweet too. If you can infuse them in hot water and just brew them for like about 20 minutes and have just a little bit of that before meals, that's a really great way of, when you introduce bitter to your body immediately signals release more saliva. So that's great, right? You're going to stop producing saliva and breaking the food down much better with the amylase, the first enzyme there. Then it sends the message to the stomach, hey, produce more gastric acid, right? Which is a good thing. Then it signals the pancreas to produce more other enzymes so that all the fats and all that gets. So that's like a simple little thing to do. You can also have it after a meal as a little tea. And it's I think it's a delicious tea. There's no contraindications, right, for what I'm talking about from a mast cell perspective?
No, dandelion root tea we recommend. It's fine for histamine, oxalates, and salicylates.
Okay. What about burdock or artichoke?
Burdock and artichoke may have possibly salicylate.
Okay. But well, you guys need to do your research. I don't know the details of every one of them, and I know it's you guys are really so great at helping people navigate through things. Just as a herbalist, I can throw out, those few things. Endographis, is that safe or no? Do you know?
Yeah, it depends on the person if they're able to onboard it, but yeah, endographis is
okay. So that's a great one. Not ginseng, but a classical in Chinese traditional Chinese medicine. You have one of the classical bitters is ginseng. It's not ginseng. Why am I blanking out on this? Okay, anyway, we'll come back. But yeah, so anything better, just bring that on. Just a really wonderful addition. And needless to say, that things like all the coffee, alcohol, which I think your community is probably avoiding already, and sweet stuff and sugar all gets metabolized in the liver. So the more you can get away with that, the less strain on the liver. For just gut support, you guys teach a lot of that stuff already, so I feel like it's kind of repetitious, but having the right kind of probiotics is going to make a big difference in how the estrogen gets metabolized. So one really interesting thing is there is something called the estrobolome, which is, as the name implies, estrogen and microbiome, right? So put them together and becomes estrobolome. It's a subset of bacteria, and we don't. From the studies, unfortunately, I've contacted people who've written about estrobolome to extrapolate and be like, what kind of bacteria is it? And I've never heard back from them. So I think the conclusion for now is that having a variety of bacterial flora is going to be key, because that subset of bacteria called the estrobolome is responsible for metabolism of estrogen. So Jamie, you were asking earlier, like how does the body break down those estrogens, right? Liver is one, but then the bacterial flora is also huge. And one of the interesting studies that when I was writing my book about estrogen dominance, which is called Overcoming Estrogen Dominance, when I was writing the book and doing research on it, one of the fascinating parts was about like how women with breast cancer also tend to have a significantly poor diversity of their microbiome, right? So a lot of times we go with one probiotic and then we just stock up on it and just do it over and over again. What we now know is more important to have a variety of probiotics and different microbes rather than just be going one and doing a lot of it, right? So I know this is another sensitive topic for your community, because a lot of probiotics that are histamine causing. So I'm going to let you guys navigate that part with your audience, but I'm just saying, improve your microbiome diversity. One of the things you can do that with is to give it the right soil to grow on, right? So doing things like prebiotics is a really good idea in the form of food. Jerusalem artichoke is a really wonderful one. Artichoke hearts is another really great one. Green banana flour, is that allowed?
Depends on the person.
Okay. You can tolerate green banana flour is wonderful. Cold potatoes, like a potato salad. Cold potatoes are also full of probiotics. Those are some of the, some of the ideas that you can incorporate that more into your diet to support your microbiome diversity.
Yeah, and I do believe on our food list we have a resistant starch section, like low histamine resistant starches, which are going to promote that that environment. And yeah, in our protocols we talk about like rebuilding that terrain. And then of course, as Kimberly said, it's all individualized. When we're working one-on-one with a client, we can do that level of work for sure.
And I see people asking about the Dutch test. We ordered the Dutch test.
Yeah,
it's one of the ones we do.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at these questions. We're almost out of time, but I want to see if we can get to like one or two of them. Are you okay on time, Magdalena?
Totally. I'm all yours. Yeah.
Okay. Let's jump to that. Okay. Can hormone replacement therapy trigger MCAS? Can MCAS create severe pain, migrating pains throughout the body?
So I'll let you answer the second part. I'll just take on the first one. The answer is yes, it can. And the reason is, for example, if you put on estradiol, which is a common HRT, first of all, make sure they're always going on bioidentical HRT and not synthetic. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, if you put it on HRT and it's giving you a reaction, get the Dutch test done, look at your metabolism of your estrogens. You're probably not breaking them down correctly. And you fix that, and you can then tolerate the HRT much better, probably. Does it cause migrating pains throughout the body?
Yeah, I mean, you're releasing all these mediators, like 1,000 mediators, and one of them is histamine, which causes a lot of inflammation. So yeah, it certainly can do that.
Okay, let's see. Long postmenopausal, would starting estrogen, progesterone help lower histamine? Or, starting estrogen and progesterone together, I think she's asking, would that help lower histamine, or should she start progesterone alone, or would this worsen symptoms?
Yeah, so this is really a question for your provider. This is just from like an anecdotal perspective, I can just say that, first of all, there is something called the window, which some practitioners sign up for it, others don't. And the window is basically, if you've been in postmenopause for more than 10 years, you need to be kind of carefully tread about getting on hormones at that point. Your receptors might not be open to it, but there are practitioners who are willing to try it. So you're gonna find that. I'm a strong believer that it's doing one hormone at a time is better than doing two, because then you don't know whether you're getting the relief from one or the other. So a good practitioner can guide you through all of that. There's just one word of caution I want to say is that do not go for things like pellets right away, because pellets, once they're embedded into your body, they just release the same amount of hormone and you can't take it out. And it's a surgical procedure, very unpleasant. You can try a lot of other forms before that to kind of figure out what is your dose and take it from there.
Yeah, and we see a lot of Mast Cell clients do better with topicals. Yeah.
Okay, so Paul is asking, if you've had a complete hysterectomy and have been through menopause, can you still have estrogen dominance? And she's saying that her MCAS is bad. We're sorry you're experiencing that, Paula.
Yeah. Yes, you can. So this is like what we alluded to before, is that even though both your hormones are low, it's even though they are both low, the ratio between them is still off, or the way the little estrogen that you have that's produced by your adrenals and your visceral fat and a little bit by your liver, the little estrogen that you have, how it's broken down, it still can be problematic. So if you do a test, it might be a really good idea, then the Dutch test, then to see how you're metabolizing those hormones.
Okay. I think we covered this in it, but if we can reiterate, how can you tell if your symptoms are MCAS related or menopause related? I'm going to go ahead and say that it's likely both related if you are someone who is experiencing MCAS, but I'm going to turn this on to Kimberly and Magdalena.
No, I agree with you. And I think, without testing, you wouldn't really identify those. And so in cases like that, I'm a big fan of testing, because then you know what to fix really quickly. If it shows you low progesterone, you just go and fix your progesterone, and it can just give you so much relief. And then you can focus on working with the Mast Cell team on getting better on other things,
Yeah. Okay. Paris is asking for Magdalena. Have you seen neuropathy happen as a result of estrogen dominance or MCAS?
As estrogen dominance, no, I have not. MCAS, I'll leave to you guys too. I mean, that's a common symptom, no?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Can be many things going on, right? Insulin related, can be B6 related, can be so many different things. So it's kind of getting at that root cause of why is that neuropathy happening, and that's where that testing comes in.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's some questions about very sore breasts. Is that okay to answer that?
Yeah, please do. Let me take a second to find it.
Daria is asking that from YouTube. Is the second from the bottom.
Yep, here we go.
What can I do right now before I get in to see my doctor, as my breasts are very, very sore and I'm estrogen dominance, bleeding all the time in pain? So, yeah, this is...
I should wait for you to answer, but we do have a slide prepared for your happy sisters, just so you know.
Oh, great. Because I was just going to say, thank you. I was just going to say, one of the products that I've sent to Beth O'Hara, for those of you who know her, she was the original founder, right, of MCAS, and she was a deep personal friend of mine. One of the things I used to send her was my cream called Happy Sisters, and the Happy Sisters cream, I specifically formulated it for cases like this, for that breast pain, for fibrocystic breast, for inflammatory responses in the breast, supporting the lymphatic massage system. And there's actually, with the product, we show how to do the lymphatic massage. And excuse me, and actually, Beth used to just put Happy Sisters on her entire body, and she always used to say, like, I just love how it makes me feel. I feel like it just moves my whole lymphatic system. It lowers inflammation in the body. So yeah, that's something you can try. We also have so you can see on that link, mastcell360.com/happy sisters. Do you guys have the supplement there as well, or is it just the cream?
I think it may just be the cream, and we do use it in clinic, and I've used it personally. So thank you for creating that cream for sure.
Yeah,
it's can be super helpful for fibrosis.
I'm so glad you're using it. Yeah,
but yeah, I've used it in anybody who needs something topical and lymphatic movement, moving that lymph in a gentle way.
You can pair it with Daria. You can pair this with other things like what Jamie and Kimberly are teaching, like the calcium glucarate is phenomenal. I also like, if it agrees with you, things like broccoli, the broccoli extract, so sulforaphane, can be super helpful for breast health if it agrees with you. So yeah.
Okay.
There is a great question about do we have a few more minutes, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a cool question about, which is super common. Mary's asking, does food with phytoestrogens help with estrogen dominance? If you want, I can answer it, because it's a bit of a paradoxical. So foods such as, like this one here would be an example of that, would be flax seeds. And this is like one of my favorite things to talk about, because flaxseed is just phenomenal, and it contains natural occurring phytoestrogens, like you alluded. And so a lot of people think, like, hold on a second, I'm estrogen dominant already. Why would I be adding more estrogen, like adding fuel to the fire, right? Seemingly. And that's a plausible logic, except that it doesn't work that way. So the reason why it doesn't work that way is because flaxseed, first of all, as you know, with estrogen dominance, estrogen is not the problem, because we all need it. So let's not demonize estrogen, right? Estrogen, we need it for our periods, having moist vaginas, to think straight, to be happy, to have beautiful hair, skin, and all that good stuff, right? Happy heart, happy bones, all of that is all estrogen, you guys. So let's not demonize it. The problem is, like I mentioned before, is how we metabolize estrogen, or is the ratio of estrogen to progesterone. That is the problem that we need to fix. Now, how does phytoestrogens play, like flaxseed, fill in this gap? First of all, it's a very gentle estrogen, so it actually helps to elevate the good estrogens. The other thing is that research shows that actually that flaxseed actually blocks the receptors for dirty estrogens, which is like, mind blowing. I love to call those phytoestrogens, such as this one, and it's not just flax. Other phytoestrogens will be things like red clover, black cohosh, a lot of like lentils are technically also phytoestrogens, and so is flaxseed. Soy is another one, right? They just are so wonderful in helping. I call them the estrogen adaptogens, because they just adapt depending on what you need. If you have too many of those bad estrogens, they literally block the receptors. The other thing that I love about flaxseed, especially ground flaxseed, is that it's phenomenal fiber. It's both soluble and insoluble fiber. So it helps you with evacuation. Remember how we talked about phase 3? If you evacuate, you are so much better off than when you're constipated, right? So it can help with constipation. So plus, I mean, fiber is just so, it's also a form of a prebiotic too, helps with the growth of the good bacteria. So all in all, great question. Thank you for that, Mary. I say you have estrogen dominant, actually you would benefit from phytoestrogens in a huge way.
Okay. Did you see any other questions come in? Let's see. Oh, someone's asking if they can get your Happy Sisters in Canada.
Yes, you just get it from the link, from the Mast Cell link. Yes, we do ship to Canada.
Yeah, so our pretty link, mastcell360.com/Happy Sisters, goes directly to Magdalena's site where you can get it in Canada. We just make a pretty link for ease of memory.
I would love to answer Olga's question about the flax seeds, follow up any recipes on how to use flax seeds. So I use flax seeds every day. Huge. And I buy whole flaxseed, keep it in the fridge because they go rancid quick. So buy a small bag, keep it in the fridge or freezer. And I put them in smoothies so it's broken down.
Yes.
So that's how I use it. I just throw it in my smoothie with other seeds that I tolerate well. And it's just like a fiber bomb. And yeah, it's great.
Go ahead.
I was just to say, you could also buy like a coffee grinder and keep, like, if you don't drink coffee, you could buy a coffee grinder and you can grind your flax seeds that way and make like protein balls or whatever recipes, you can tolerate.
Sprinkle in salads, soups.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And then one other, for those of you who are like, maybe like if you're on the road and you want a quick snack, there is a really cool brand called Flackers. And they just it's a super clean product. It's just flaxseed. I think it's like they have rosemary, savory, blah, 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 like, and then sea salt. And that's it, like sea salt and flaxseed. There's nothing else added to it. Super nice, clean product. I think even your community can have it.
Yeah. I have them in my cabinet, and Ashley was talking to my dietitian this morning about how to use them because eating them plain is kind of like a little strong, right?
Yeah.
And she had some great ideas that I learned just this morning about, put them on your salad for crunch, break them up. Put them on your soup for crunch, right? Like a tomato soup or something. So you feel like you have a cracker or something with it.
Yeah. I use it with my salad as a on the side or put it on top. But also like when I travel and I want a healthy, like even lunch, I would use that with like hummus, right? So yeah, that's a good one too.
Great. Well, Magdalena, it was so good to have you with us today, and thank you for the extra time. All right, let me hide that. I'm just going to throw up for those who are kind of like, where do I go? How does this fit into MCAS? Where do I even start? We do see clients one-on-one inside our clinic. For those larger things like the hormone imbalance, that's going to be our advanced track. So reading a Dutch test is a functional test. So you'll want to apply to the advanced program. If you are international, we do still recommend starting with a strategy session. So you can find all of that on our website, mastcell360.com/application. So you can see the 2 tiers of support we have going on there. And yeah, we thank you so much for being with us all today. I do believe we're off next Monday for Labor Day, but we will be back with you on September 8th. So thank you again, Magdalena. Thank you, Kimberly, for your time. And thank you, everyone who joined us live and is watching the replay. And so glad to have you as part of this community. See you next time.